You know what I'd love to talk about with you is, I don't know if you want to start right away, but the concept that drives me crazy, and tell me if this is, the concept that drives me crazy is players always think they want the club in front of them.
Right.
And in front of them, to me, this is the club.
Mm-hmm.
You don't swing with the club in front of you. As a matter of fact, it gets behind you very quickly.
Yep.
The guys that hit the ball the farthest have the club behind them the longest, the most.
You got it.
So what does, I'd love that to be the topic of what we talk about.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about right now. So we got the club head itself kicking out or having the club in front of you is like one of the oldest adages of good players ever. And right. I think that comes from the PGA Tour is built with people who swing too far in, too out. So to them, having a feeling of, out too many degrees. And you even do that with your driver. That's been part of the biggest hindrance to you not winning 10 times as many tournaments is just the swing direction for you is too far in to out. So most players who are trying to compromise that, they instead try to find a way to swing across the ball, which is no better, but that is a feel that would help them swing straighter.
And you've seen like Corey Pavin practice swings.
Yeah.
I played with Jeff Ogilvy last week in New Zealand, and his practice swing is great.
Yeah. That's their best attempt at trying to keep their swing direction too far to the right. That's
and maybe swing swing direction too is a good idea.
Yep, exactly. So I think there's a better way to do that, or how to measure it and look at a swing video and know when the shaft is too far in and how to move it straighter without actually trying to swing 10 degrees to the left. Because that's the rest of the PGA Tour has the other problem. They swing 10 degrees to the left and 7 degrees down with their driver and then can't get that into the air either. So that's where you're trying to head is towards the down and left too much if that's the advice you're seeking.
So when somebody says they're stuck, and then I stayed behind it too long and flipped it.
Right.
I've always thought flip to me from generic terms here. I mean, is the club flipping means this way, or cupping, where I think a lot of players confuse flipping with rolling.
Right.
To turn the face over, right?
That's confusing for both. Well, most people let me turn my background off so it's just easier to see. The plague of the PGA Tour is one that you've somewhat fallen into as well. On the way down, your left arm gets out too far. So at this point in time, you're ready to slice. To accommodate that, you begin to just extend without turning very much, which enables you to just keep lowering the shaft.
Right.
Arms too far out, then you lower the shaft by just bending backward and tilting to the right. Now the shaft moves way in, but then there's your stuck. I believe that's the connotation most people are describing when they say stuck. Shoulders too closed, bending backwards too much, too early, and then the shaft is too far in. And then complicated with that, the face starts to open to the path. So then you've got the biggest pushes as an element of your driver that way.
It looks something like this.
Yeah, you got it. And all of that starts from either having the club too high over your head at the top, so that on the way down, the shaft is entering your neck too high. And we'll look at a couple of those for you too. But once you've done that, you are ready to hit across the ball. So now you have to accommodate something that's not a very PGA Tour-like swing from there, which is bending backward, tilting to the right, staying really closed.
And that's a power loss for sure.
It is. I mean, swinging to the right is very helpful, but it's challenging to swing in to out, hit the shot very solid, and have the face closed enough to the path to not push it into the trees.
Keep you from continuing to rotate.
You got it. Yeah. Yep. So there, we just recorded that and saved it. We'll have that for a spot somewhere on YouTube.
Okay. And then to continue with that thought. So here's the club behind the player or underneath the player out to the right.
Mm-hmm.
But if the fix, where I've seen a lot of teachers today say, well, if you just get your arms to go out, that'll automatically flatten the shaft.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
It's way more complicated than that. And then if that were true, every GolfTec student that ever came in and sliced wouldn't slice because they all have their arm too far out on the way down. So it's always pushing out too far, and the shafts aren't shallowing. It's much more that goes into the external rotation of your right arm and how to keep that piece in long enough, as opposed to letting your shoulder internally rotate, which is the start of really having your right elbow too high and the shaft standing up too much on the way down.
Yeah, so I mean, if you told an average golfer, if you just push your arms out as you continue to open,
right,
the shaft is going to lay down behind you. That's going to cause the most slice I've ever seen.
Correct. It's just more complicated than that. So I'm as confused as you are when I see the stories of just push your arm out on the way down, and that will somehow flatten out the angle of the shaft. It couldn't be more opposite than that. So we spend most of our day teaching golf lessons to people who slice and trying to keep their left arm, this one, further behind them on the way down, not pushing it out. They already do that. That's the point you're making, and it's spot on.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And so I find it very hard, to think of wrist angles during a swing where the swing is moving, the club is moving 120 miles an hour, right?
Yeah, it's going fast.
Great players that think of flexing their palmar flexion or pulling the wrist on their downswing. I think that's a hard thing to do under competition.
It definitely is. That's where, if you're going to try to do something like that, I'm always going to suggest you do it slowly at first, to try to build that feel in, because what you're describing from the top down is the fastest part of the swing, and you trying to control anything in there is really challenging at top speed.
Very challenging. And as we learn more and more, and technology's gotten better and better, and you look at some of the greatest players and greatest swings of all times, I'm seeing a real trend in instructors, and I would say many instructors, to increase shoulder turn, you have to increase hip turn, you have to increase leg turn.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of teachers now are promoting the left heel off the ground or the lead heel off the ground in order to get a longer swing to hit it farther. And you can go back in time and look at Bobby Jones, Walter Hagen, and keep going. Ryder Nelson, Ben Hogan, they were all lifted their left heel, had massive hip turns. And modern teaching, going back 20 years ago, was, hey, X factor, restrict hip turn. Where do you stand on that as far as teaching good players?
Yeah, good question. Let me pull up. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see it. Okay. And I'll pull up a couple of your swings. Can you see my screen okay?
I can.
Okay. I've got a swing of 2 swings of you. So I think you play your very best, if you can see those okay.
Yep.
We'll stop when just about when your left humerus is parallel to the ground, a little bit before that. Or let me try to sync these up in decent time. These are in about the same spot.
Right.
This is at a U.S. Open you were playing at, and you were 3rd in driving distance and 5th in fairways hit through 2 rounds. I remember that because
at a U.S. Open?
Senior U.S. Open. This is a few years ago. So it was through 2 rounds. Your last 2 rounds didn't necessarily go that same way. But take a look at your right leg, how straight that is, and the little bit of flex in your left knee, enough where you can see some space between your legs. This one is similar, but not nearly the same.
Shaft is flatter on the one on the right.
You got it. And this was the last time we practiced on the left one. This was the first swing you had. So for you to get all the way up to the top and that piece you've always struggled with, which was the extension of your shoulders,
yep,
bending yourself backward enough, that was always a tricky part for you. To be able to extend your shoulders back enough and make a long enough swing, you need to keep straightening your right leg as a piece to help you do that. So here's the top of this swing. So differences in there to help your shaft travel this far. You didn't have to pull your arms apart and move the sweet spot to the right. That's basically.
I see the screen.
Oh, sorry. So swing on the left, because of the limiting amount that you're turning your hips and your shoulders at this point, to make your swing long enough, you start pulling your arms apart and then the shaft starts to move to the right. This swing, this is really the top of the swing that you made here. You kept turning as long as you could, which was really the part we were practicing there. And then there's the top of the swing. Where this becomes interesting relative to your earlier comments is on the downswing. So when your left arm, left humerus is parallel to the ground there, how the shaft passes through the top of your shoulder as opposed to a little bit below it, like you see in this one. So at this point in time, you have the face more open in this swing. You have the face more closed here. You have your left arm further behind you. The shaft is passing below your shoulder. This is a swing direction and a club face angle relative to the path that at this point in time helps you hit little draws. This one with the shaft too high, going through the top of your shoulder and the club face more open than this swing, so you can see much less of it. At this point in time, you're ready to slice. So you need to accommodate that somehow. And the way that you do that was to stop turning, raise the shaft up. And by the time the club head's going to be a couple frames from the ball in here, you can see a difference in the angle of approach between that one and I'll try to move the in here. So how much straighter you're able to swing into the ball onto that picture on the right. The handle's lower, the angle between your forearm and the shaft are more similar here than they are in this one. So that's your best attempt at not slicing. And then ultimately as you hit, the club shaft comes through and you know this picture well, but to give a good comparison of how you were able to then not hit these really low, keep going into the follow through where the shaft comes out there as opposed to how much higher it is, and then how much more open the club face is on the right picture. And how it stays relatively open. It isn't continuing to aim down at the ground.
What's amazing to me too is looks like a hybrid on the right and a mid-iron on the left.
Yeah. It's not that you can't do this with every club, but your initial question was, should you straighten your right leg in the backswing? That is always a really nice way to start. I think the coaches that came along with video cameras at first and the idea that the swing is like a coiling spring just got that, that just became so dogmatic and was written in so many books and on so many DVDs that it just didn't get knocked out of golf for a long time until recently. So love the advice you're giving on do that more. You should do that more in your own swing too.
Yeah, and it seems to me it's later in the backswing than earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've got a mirror here face on, but as I get from, we could call it P3, and I've got to keep that right leg.
Yeah, keep going. Your camera's just a touch high. I can only see like the top of your head. And you have a nice garage door opener though.
What's that?
You have a nice garage door opener though. That's good.
How's that angle?
That's good. Yep. So that would be a really nice start. And then the shaft, even though you can't see it, everybody who would be watching this can see that that's aimed very straight relative to the target. It doesn't look like that swing I just posted where the shaft was much more across the line. And then at that point in time, you can, you have some more leeway to continue to turn through the ball and not have your left wrist as flexed. A big part of this one, Brad, when you look at these two pictures again, would be at this point in time, I'll even just try to go a couple frames further on both of them so you're above the trees.
Yep.
Notice how your left wrist on the swing that we're both saying is much better than the one on the left, how you can see the back of your glove. You can see that patch.
Yep.
And on this swing, if anything, the patch of your glove might be aimed pretty close to your target.
Hitting overdraws.
That you, as you're hitting, even though we're way into the follow through talking about that, that's you coming through the golf ball and actually flexing your wrist and rolling the shaft too much. And then it shows up in that follow through.
So, first steps. So if you were going to start over from the last time we were together, which was a few months ago, we'll be getting right leg to turn more. I think my arms need to be deeper. It'd be helpful to keep the elbows a little closer together.
And, you know, quite honestly, I'd probably just practice the, keep trying to turn more. And then if you wanted like a little different trick, let me do the share screen piece here again. Okay, so this was swing 1 on the left. And you know that backswing, you've seen that one before. Here's
Why do you think that on the left wrist is cupped more, isn't it?
It is. The longer you keep pulling your arms apart and continue to raise your arms up over your head, the harder it is for you to keep your left wrist from extending that way. This one on the right, you notice how your arms are closer together, your right elbow isn't as high off the ground, and the face is more closed.
Yes.
You know, what I would do for this one is actually practice a little different. So a way to practice would be keep doing the turning, and you demonstrated that great, but I'm trying to tie a little different feel to it. So once you get to where your left arm is parallel to the ground, P3, and then you keep going, notice how the club head itself, from the way you're viewing it, is to the left of my hands.
Yes.
That would be the feel that I would try to associate that with. And I'd use your camera, your iPad to try to test that. So all the way up to the top, you always had the club head on the left-hand side of your hands. And then I'd swing down and just try to hit. So first I'd try to do one of those. You'll recognize how difficult that is. And then for you, that's going to really program your swing direction to the left. So you're going to hit like a nasty slice on the first one. If you don't, then you didn't do this nearly enough anyway. And then you can see my club face angle, how I would try to keep it very closed. And I would do that just from 3 to 4. So don't worry about moving up to P3. Then 3 to 4, close the face and keep the club head as far outside of your hands as you can and just hit one.
So start a swing from 3 to 4.
No, I would start at 1, start at address like always, but that's where I would spend the time. Just make your normal swing to 3, and then 3 to 4, just keep that club head on the opposite side of your hands.
Well, I can see with this mirror, keeping it would look like.
You got it. And then I'd hit one. Now that's going to feel terrible. The result is very different, but it'll start letting you tie a feel to not pulling your arms apart, not extending your left wrist, and not opening the club face as a result. So there's normal Brad. What I'm suggesting is from 3 to 4, you actually keep the shaft as far to the left of your hands as you can and close the face, and then just hit. It's going to be terrible.
Elbows will feel closer together.
You're going to have to keep them closer together to keep the shaft out that direction.
So that feeling without lifting, too. I'm not trying to do it by.
Yeah. You don't need to raise your arm up. You don't need to try to level out your shoulder tilts. Yep. And then you hit. If you could do that 10, 20 times and hit some really nasty shots, I think you'd start at least being able to tie the feeling that you have to what it actually looks like, which is the value of practicing with the camera so that you can see it.
Do you think a nasty swing would feel, what would be a pull cut or
either a pull cut or a straight pull? None of these would be very high. Hey, you've been doing the radio show for how long now?
Well, it's been just over a year, just the facts.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure I wanted to do this. I didn't know how much time it would take. So now I've had a year under my belt, and I do it on a Monday, 4 to 5 Eastern time, which is always, you know, the radio show on Monday is the best because usually when we're not having viruses floating around the world, there's always a weekend of golf to talk about.
Yeah.
On any of the tours.
Yeah, good point. And it's late enough in the day where you have some time to digest it and be ready to talk about it.
Yeah,
so that'd be a good time.
On the East Coast, it's a drive time, 4 or 5.
Yep.
I've been fortunate in this kind of unusual position I'm in now of being still as a player a little bit, media a little bit more, teaching or coaching a little bit more. So I'm in this very odd position of having, I want to think it's a unique role. You know, people that, you don't see many teachers that are on camera announcing, major championships and then still playing a little bit. So I like it. I think it's a good blend. And having played the tours for 35 years, I have a lot of people I met over time, a lot of instructors. I was very curious as a player, talking to them. I played with most of the greats and played with Arnold and Jack. I knew Byron Nelson and met Sam Snead, and now getting to have played with some of the younger players now, like Tiger Woods isn't young anymore compared to Rory Mcllroy, who's now 30 years old, and then but still getting to see some of the college players, because for the last 5 years we've been announcing college golf, so we saw Matt Wolff before anybody knew who he was, or Colin Morikawa. So it's nice. And then I'm seeing some of the top female players in the world, both coming here for instruction, and then see them when we cover their Women's Open.
Have you learned anything that comes top of mind that's super interesting about doing the show?
Well, I think when you do a show, a radio show, you're by yourself. Like I have an office where you were on the show. And if you could imagine being alone, having to talk to a bunch of people with nobody to look at, because you and I we're not together, but we're looking in the eye of the camera, I'm looking at you, we can have a conversation. So without that camera, it's unusual. So a lot of times I'll have my producer Carlos on FaceTime, or else I'll be looking at something, trying to pretend I'm talking to someone, whether I have a call-in guest, and I've been lucky to have some great players calling. I mean, Rory's been so nice to be on the show a lot of times, and everybody wants to listen to what he has to say. And it's helped me when I go on air for Fox to talk about golf, because I have to be a little bit more concise with my thoughts, knowing how to say it, how to express it.
I think about the PGA Tour commentating, and I'm one of the first to say it's really hard to listen to a lot of them talk, because the knowledge base about how to play the game is not necessarily ever in question with anyone. So Brandel or Nick Faldo or Johnny Miller, they would talk about how to play golf, and that was great. No problem. I think that's awesome. But when it comes down to explaining why someone hits a ball into the left rough or the right trees, that is so embarrassing to almost listen to, but that's not really what their job is. So as critical as people are of TV commentators, it's their job's to entertain, it's to go quick and manage live TV, which is extremely challenging.
Well, and what's the hardest part about it, and I can tell you this about, let's just say some players hit a bad shot, whether it was to the right or the left, let's call this to the right rough, and then your producer comes back and all of a sudden slows down a swing in super slow motion. Mm-hmm. You've got to pick off why he's hit it to the right. And I think this is where people like Johnny Miller, he could get away with things because he could say something so outrageous that people would believe him. And right. If you compared that player's great swing to a swing that's just pushed a shot, there's not a lot of difference that you can see in super slow motion.
No, most of it's just a mishit shot, if anything. But it's so true, though. Consumers of that information, people watching TV, are a little bit naive to that logical fallacy of Johnny Miller is awesome at golf. He must clearly know why this is happening. And it's just couldn't be further from the truth. To really know why someone hits a ball the way they do, you can't just make that a hobby. It's got to be a career, and there's a lot of study that goes into that, and education. If you don't teach golf very often or at all, there's really no way that you should be giving advice on how to play the game, because you haven't actually helped anyone do it to know if your advice is correct. Exactly. So I know you've had a good taste of that too, which I think is awesome. Starting to teach golf.
I have a great story. My first time I worked for NBC in 2010. My first time with Johnny Miller was at Doral when there was a World Golf Championship event there. And I worked on Thursday and Friday my first time. And then Johnny comes in for Saturday and Sunday. And this particular weekend, Charles Schwartzel, who grew up in South Africa and went to the Ernie Els Golf Academy down there, was in the final group on Saturday with Ernie. And I was covering a few holes. I had 4 holes, the 4th, the 5th, the 5th and 9th, the 13th, and the 14th holes. And I had little monitors in my tower on the 14th hole. And Johnny Miller was calling the 3rd hole, and it was Ernie Els' second shot. And on this 3rd hole, it was a really difficult hole because there was water all the way on the right throughout the entire hole. The whole location was to the right. The wind was blowing to the right. There was a slope left to right on the green, and then if you missed the flag to the right, it could go downhill and into the water. And the camera was set up right behind Ernie as he's hitting an 8-iron from 150 yards or so. And I remember Johnny saying, you can see Ernie, he's aiming, now this is 150 yards away, and working on a television camera, and Johnny says he's aiming 8 feet left of the flag. And I'm like, what? How did he, and I'm like in disbelief. And now Ernie hits the shot 25 or 30 feet left of the flag. And Johnny says, well, he pulled that. Right. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Really?
He didn't pull that. So I was just curious. So I got to see him, and I didn't know him well. And he's very approachable and very nice. And I said, Johnny, how did you come up with 8 feet on that hole for what you saw Ernie Els do with his 8-iron? He goes, Brad, I've been doing this for so long, I can see it in their eyes where they're looking. And I died. I'm like, oh my gosh, he believes that so much.
Oh, man.
It's impressive sounding. And I'm like, and I think that's why he was so good for so long, because as ridiculous as something like that might sound to you or me, it sounds great to the average golfer.
They believe him. He's a trustworthy guy at that point in time. One of the best hitters, maybe the best ever at some point in time in his career. That's how people remember him. That's funny. So I think it's cool what you're doing with Fox too, but you did mention how Rory's been on your show once or twice too. Do you want to share anything that you're doing with him?
Well, so, I mean, I consider a phone call I got from Rory Mcllroy 2 years ago to be one of the greatest thrills and honors in my life. I mean, for a player that truly has had as much natural talent as anybody that's played this game, and at a young age had already won 4 major championships. At the age he was 24 or 5, he'd won 4 majors, and hadn't been putting particularly well the last few years. And I think through some friends on his team, his dad, they suggested talking to me. And, I'm lucky because he's so good. We had lightning strike in a bottle where after the first couple hours together, he went and played at Bay Hill and won that tournament by 4 shots, and maybe had one of the best putting rounds of his career. I was just like, holy smokes. And, look, I was a good putter as a player. I got better at putting as I got older, which is not what everybody thinks happens in this game. There's a lot of discussion, even yesterday, watching some stuff Randall Chambly's posted about, are you born that way, or do you learn to have great touch and great feel? And I'm thinking, nobody's born that way. Maybe somebody's given more God-given talent or ability, but nobody gets that great without some amount of work and some amount of time put into it, and tremendous amounts of it. And what I've seen with Rory Mcllroy, look, Tiger had tremendous physical skills like Rory does, but I'm really impressed with Rory's work ethic. This guy works hard. He trains hard. He spends a lot of time, everything he can to do wellness in his body and his mind. So people might think that they're just lucky because they have a great physical skill. Well, this guy wakes up every day trying to figure out a way to get better. And we just had our 2-year anniversary a couple of weeks ago at Bay Hill.
Did he get you anything? Did you get him anything?
Oh, I did.
It's a special day, Brad.
No, but we played tennis against each other. I'll tell you about that. But no, he went up and he was nice to say something in the press at Bay Hill that week, that he had a conversation with me. And, as much of the work that we've done together, some of it's sitting in a coffee shop talking about it. I've been lucky enough to be around a lot of great players. I've been helping some top players on both tours, PGA and LPGA tour players. And I can promise you I've never had any tour player come to me and say, I need to try harder. I need to take more time. I need more thoughts to think about. I need to use a different putter every week. I don't ever get that. Yeah. And what I've seen, and a few things that we've talked about, when a great player plays well, what they say about how they played it is always in a simple phrase. If they had a good swing, thought it was something easy to say. It wasn't hard to explain, And what is hard to explain is when a player plays great is, I just knew what the club would be. The club came out of the bag almost before I got the yardage. I saw my shot. I never had a doubt. I swung with freedom. I swung with trust. Those are the things that I've heard the great players think about or say for a long period of time. And, you know, the thing about instruction, when you're just teaching a player on a range, you can talk about a lot of different things that happen in the swing and get a player where they're in some sort of a rhythm on the range. And then all of a sudden the student goes and they leave, and then all of a sudden they got to go out on a golf course where you're not there to tell them what to do, and every shot's every 12 minutes. And that's a battle. And that's I think that's the greatest part about our game. It's not like it's a ball hitting contest on a range. It's how do you manage your misses? How do you react to a great shot as much as how do you react to a bad shot?
Right. Yeah, you unpacked a lot in there too. Of I always find it interesting. You know, you and I have been on the driving range at tour events for years too, and when you see some of the players, they seem to either be like Brooks Koepka, like Rory McIlroy, like Gary Woodland, guys who show up and they want to just beat everyone and crush them. I am gathering that from your insight. That's what you're saying Rory's like. And then you've had some other guys who, once they make $7-8 million playing golf, they don't really like the lifestyle. They're not as interested in traveling all the weeks. They've got other things they want to do. And to see those two different people come together, that's really what you look at for the top of the leaderboard in major tournaments.
Yeah, well, I watched last night, Fox Sports 1, FS1, put on the final round of the U.S. Open Shinnecock Hills last night. And so that was 2018. Shinnecock, Koepka, and Dustin Johnson were playing the final group. And on the 18th hole, Koepka had a 2-shot lead. Tommy Fleetwood had shot 63 and finished. And it finished almost as Koepka was making, just as after he made the turn. And Koepka got up and hit this drive. He took one practice swing like we were playing a practice round together at the Medalist. Got up, took a waggle, took a look, and bam. It looked like he had done it a million times, and it looked always to me like Tiger looked comfortable in his environment. Koepka didn't, because of the magnanimity of this thing, didn't overwhelm him. And one of the great things Rory said to me when he won earlier this year in China, you know, before the turn of the actual year. Tiger had won in Japan the week before. So Rory's playing the final hole in China with Schauffele, par 5, dogleg to the right. There's water on the right. And Rory got up there and overcut it a little bit. He was trying to hit a low peeling shot and hit on the bank. It didn't go in the water, but he had to lay up from this par 5, and 2 makes a 5. Schauffele makes a birdie. They go back to that same hole for the playoff. And I said, Rory, you know, you have to go hit your first shot in the playoff on a hole where you just hit it in the water. And I said, what were you thinking about? He said, well, you know, it's a good question. He said, I hit the first one. I was trying to hit a low cut, and I feel like I leaned on it, gotten a little bit in front of it. And my dad had always told me to have a little pause at the top and let my arms come in transition. That was a thought in a field that was really easy to describe, and he pounded this drive 30, 40 yards by where Schauffele said.
Right.
So it was easy for him to think about, easy for him. It wasn't like there was panic because he had done. And I had Webb Simpson on the radio show after he won in Phoenix. He beat Finau in a playoff. And on the 72nd hole in regulation, 18th hole that Sunday, Finau had hit his second shot to 6 feet. So Webb had a 20-footer for birdie. He had to make this putt, or Finau gets to 2 putt. It had a little right to left break. Finau made that putt. I'm sorry, Webb Simpson made that putt, and then they went back to that long 18th hole par 4 where you would think that Simpson would be at a disadvantage. Well, this time, Finau hits it to 30 feet. He's outside of Webb's 20-footer for his birdie. Finau misses, makes par, and Simpson now has a similar putt, but totally different perspective, right? This is now, doesn't have to make it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if he doesn't make it, he 2 putts, he can still go play another playoff hole, and he cans that one. So I asked him, he goes, you know, he's tried the last few years, and I would say Webb would be in that list of overachievers, right? A guy that, you know, when you look at physical skills, you go, well, he doesn't quite have the physical swing, but very efficient when he plays. And he said, look, I try to give every shot or putt I have the same low level of importance, whether it's the third hole on Thursday or the final putt on Sunday. And he says, I give myself, and I loved what he said, I give myself something called critical response time, CRT, critical response time, where I allow myself 40 seconds to think about the shot if I didn't hit it well. But then I can't think about it anymore. And to me, that's one of the greatest bits of advice you could give any player at the elite level, especially college kids that are very emotional. Putting coaches is a guy named David Orr.
Yeah.
Used to teach Justin Rose, and he's taught me an awful lot. But Orr, he likes having players try different things with different grips, skills, teaching, imitating other people. I think those are in imitating other people, but still making the putt.
Yeah.
I think those are good things to practice.
I like the creativity you're advocating for in putting, for sure. It's a way to practice and not get bored. It's a way to still practice and learn how to coordinate some feel.
Yeah.
Putting like Ben Crenshaw is really nice, but putting like Jim Furyk right now would be also very nice. Good way to practice.
Like Jim Furyk.
Like him, or then turn around and try to make a putt like Ben Crenshaw would. Really long backstroke, really short ball.
I actually played tournaments trying to be Jack Nicklaus, trying to be Tom Watson, and what did they look like? What did they feel like? So, you could do silly little things here in whether it's your garage, your basement. Can you see down to that cup from right where you are?
Yes.
If you don't have a cup to putt to, why don't you putt to a tee? You can set up tees. Why don't you putt practicing through tees?
Mm-hmm.
You got to keep your mind occupied here for some amount of time you can. I like contests more than anything. When I'm trying to teach somebody, can you have a putting contest with somebody else out on the green? So do you think on this first putt, Nick, I could hit it through those two tees and make it?
It's a good lesson. Gamify your practice. Try to make it a best out of 5 approach. I don't know if I'd putt against you, but find one of your hacker buddies who's struggling. Win some money from them.
That's a good one. So when I first met Rory, we had a putting contest that day. And he goes, I haven't had a putting contest in 8 years, he said. And I go, 8 years? How do you remember that? He goes, I didn't remember. He says it was against Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh,
memorable.
I would remember that too.
Yeah. I think that's awesome for sure. Another one, do you like any training aids for putting besides just putting some obstacles out?
Sure. I have been representing Blast Motion for years. And, I like this thing because for a few reasons. First of all, it's portable. It Bluetooths to your phone and gives you some data. We worked with this before. It slips easily onto the putter. And it's the stuff that players think about, like tempo or timing, face rotation. Now, what's great is you can use this on a practice green. You can use it on the golf course when you go play a Pro-Am or a practice round, and every putt is time-stamped, so you can get your data, at the end when you turn your phone on, and everything gets recorded. So I'll show you when we first started talking today, I hit one putt before we started our conversation, and these were my numbers. This is kind of the stuff that it showed me.
Yeah.
And you can see that 0.53 on there. That's the speed of the backstroke from when I take the putter back immediately when it first starts moving to the end of the backstroke. And then you have the 0.32 is this. Oh, sorry. It's just downloading a few other strokes. But so for me, it's instant feedback. I like to get a player's numbers when they're putting their best so that I can go back to seeing what they use. And, you get numbers like, your ratio or your tempo is the ratio from your backstroke time to when you hit it.
Yep. All those are
length
awesome.
Backstroke, rotation. Yeah. So
sure. Data can drive some good putting instruction for sure.
Right. So here's three really putts that I've hit.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're all within 4/100ths of a second.
Yep.
That's kind of tour player level. And it's not perfect, but it's pretty close.
Right.
So I look at these numbers when a player's putting good, and then I can always go back to them. And what's cool about this is now I press one of them and it can tell me what all the numbers are. So I'm normally 1.8 to 1. And I always have a little bit more forward stroke rotation than backward stroke rotation because I'm closing the face faster coming through because I aim a little bit to the right.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're bringing up awesome points. You know a ton of your tendencies from being able to measure your stroke. So then you know what you're likely to do. You aim to the right and you hit little pulls that go in the hole. And that's just worth knowing. Everyone should know that.
Yeah, so let me, while the pressure's on, you're watching. I'll hit one more putt, see what the numbers look like. This is probably 12, 13 feet. 0.56. Yeah, so those numbers again.
You're living right in that same range, yep. So then you know that if you start missing some putts, it's probably not because of your stroke, which should give you some good confirmation that.
Yeah, and that's, I try to keep it that simple. I've been able to keep it that simple for a long time. And, you know, I work a lot with players, so I'm trying to preach consistency of everything that you do, whether it's how you practice, how you have a routine, how you prepare when you're getting ready to go to the course versus how you're preparing when you're practicing at home. Like right now, there's a lot of unknown for tour players. They don't know when their next tournament's going to be. So this is probably a good time if you're going to make a mechanical swing change, whether it was your full swing, your putting, or your chipping. This is a good time to do that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, then you can do a lot of training right now. And I'm saying, you know, players probably have a full month before they're going to at least know when they're going back in action.
Yeah, I like it.
I know see you hit a putt.
You got time?
Come on.
I'm running a little short. Let's keep going.
Let's
walk out here at this putting green. I'll show you what I got. Where do you usually start with? Like, let's say someone who shoots in the 90s comes to you for a putting lesson. Where do you start with them?
Well, I always like to see a player hit a few putts before I say anything.
Sure.
I'll listen to them tell me, you know, what their history's been lately, how they're putting, how they're feeling, what they feel like when they're putting their best. But I'd much rather video a player. And I learned this early on. I gave Yanni Singh some putting lessons. So this is when she was just fallen out of the best player in the LPGA Tour. And I didn't video her before and after. And when we videoed the putt from down the line like we are here, and then we videoed a putt face on, and then we went in to have a soda in the grill room. And when we came back, there was a markedly different look in her, just her postures. And I wish I hadn't taken a video before we started. And that was a big lesson to me. So I'm not quite down the line for watching these putts here, Nick, but you know, one of the things, you're obviously a good player and been around for a long time. I like to see some sort of symmetry in a player when they putt, with the length of their backstroke and the length of the follow have to be, to me, somewhat close.
That's a great start.
And that, to me, really can help with the consistency of their speeds of their putts. But if you just stay there for 1 second before you go to the next one, it's nice the whole way. Go ahead and go to your desk position.
Oh yeah.
And just stop before you go. So if when I look at you right now, you have one of my favorite, I don't know if you call this fundamentals, but I look at your shaft plane, your right hand up to your right wrist, and your right forearm and your shaft are on the same plane. To me, I love that. And I see a sliver. Go ahead and put your left hand back on. I see a sliver of your left forearm. And to me, that is what looks like most of the great players. And your eye line is actually really cool right here, because your eye line is right above the flagstick and it's probably slightly inside the ball line, which again is another fundamental that I teach. And if you looked at your cervical spine, it's almost parallel to the ground, not quite, but your thoracic spine is nice and rounded, and it looks like you have a slight knee flex. Your backside's out just a little bit, but your lower back is nice and comfortable and relaxed. Now, if you were going to tell me about your putting, are you a good putter? Is it a strength?
Yeah, I bet I'd probably fit somewhere like in average on the PGA Tour, right around there. This is the best part, for sure.
Yep, and you look like when you hit a good putt like that last one, you have a little bit of an arc inside. The face is opening and closing to your target line. It's staying pretty good to your arc, pretty square to your arc. And I like how when you followed through there, I can tell that you've had the putter's released, the toes past the heel, the head of the putter is past the grip, which I love to see. I don't like to see, I don't know if I'd call it the Dave Stockton, the pulling action. I don't like to see the shaft leaning too far forward through impact. I like to see the putt. No, I'm not a big fan of that at all. Blocking style release. Phil Mickelson does that a little bit. Not to say you can't putt that well. That's just a preference to me. But I'd much rather see when you go to follow through and hold that you draw that shaft line up between your arms and it goes right up to your sternum to the placket of your shirt. Yep. I think that's really what I look to see. And the toe is past the heel there, and the putter's fully released, and it's a little bit off the ground there, isn't it? Yeah. You get a little rise angle. The putters come back up off the ground.
Yeah. Well, I've been watching you do this for years, so I just got.
There you go.
Do that between you, Mike Weir, and Aaron Badley. I had enough putting lessons watching that.
Boy, oh boy, Mike Weir, a good putter. Listen, this is great stuff, Nick.
Yeah. Tell me where people can follow you online.
Well, I'm on Instagram. It's B Faxon. I don't.
Okay.
I've been doing a lot of posts there. I'm on Twitter, Brad Faxon. And where else? Where else can you be online?
Fox. You can find you on
Fox.
Fox.
Just the facts on Sirius XM. Now that show's been postponed until it's indefinite, until everything gets back up online.
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
Well,
no, it's been awesome to do this with you too.